All right, welcome everyone. So I know you've all mastered the map of the digestive system in your anatomy and physiology classes. What we're going to do now is revisit that same map, but this time we're looking at it through the lens of nutrition. We're not just focusing on the parts, but on how those parts turn the food we eat into the fuel we use every single day. So let's get started.
It really all comes down to a pretty simple question. Think about it. How does the sandwich you had for lunch or the cereal you had for breakfast become the actual energy your brain is using to process this information right now? It's an incredible transformation, and that's exactly what we're going to break down today.
The best way to think about the digestive system is to picture it as the body's own incredibly advanced nutrient processing plant. Seriously, it's a factory that takes in raw materials, your food, and converts them into the final usable products, the nutrients. You already know the anatomy. You've seen the blueprint of this factory. Now, we're going to focus on its day-to-day operations.
And like any good factory, this one has a very clear mission, which really boils down to three core jobs. First, it has to break down the raw materials. Second, it has to absorb all the valuable stuff. And finally, it's got to have a way to get rid of the waste. So break down, absorb, eliminate. That is the whole game plan.
That first mission, breaking things down, well, that's what we call digestion. It's the absolutely essential process of taking big, complex food molecules, think about the protein in a piece of chicken, and chopping them up into tiny little nutrient components like amino acids that are finally small enough for a body to actually use.
Now, to get this breakdown done, the system uses a really cool two-pronged attack. First up, you've got mechanical digestion. This is the physical part, the crushing, the grinding, the churning. At the same time, it launches a chemical digestion, using powerful acids and enzymes to totally dismantle food on a molecular level.
And the MVPs of that chemical process are enzymes. Just think of them as tiny biological catalysts. They're these amazing little proteins that make the chemical reactions needed to break down nutrients happen at lightning speed. Without enzymes, the whole process would just be way too slow to keep us going.
But it's also important to know that not every single thing we consume needs to be broken down like this. Some things are already in their simplest form. Water, minerals, and most vitamins, for example, are small enough to get a free pass. They can be absorbed directly into the system, no digestion required. So, once all the nutrients are broken down into those tiny usable pieces, we get to the second mission, absorption. And this is the crucial step, right? This is the whole point. It's the process of actually pulling those nutrients out of the digestive tract and moving them into the body's transportation systems, the bloodstream and the lymphatic systems, so they can finally be delivered wherever they're needed.
The main pathway through our processing plant, the central conveyor belt, if you will, is the gastrointestinal tract. You'll usually just see it called the GI tract. You might also see it referred to as the alimentary canal. It's basically one long, muscular tube that runs all the way from the mouth to the other end.
And as you'll definitely remember from anatomy, this pathway is a pretty familiar one. Food comes in the mouth, and then it makes its journey sequentially through the pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, and large intestine, before whatever's left is eliminated. This is the fundamental route of our conveyor belt.
But that main conveyor belt, well, it can't do the entire job all by itself. It has a vital support crew known as the accessory organs. Now, these organs aren't technically part of that main tube, but they produce and store substances that are absolutely essential for digestion to happen. And here's that support crew. You've got the mechanical helpers, the teeth and the tongue, and then you have the chemical factories, the salivary glands, the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. These guys produce and secrete all the enzymes and bile that make chemical digestion possible. The whole operation really depends on them.
Okay, so we've seen the big picture map of the whole system. Now let's kind of zoom in. Let's pull out the microscope and look at the actual architecture of the GI tract wall itself, because understanding its structure is totally key to understanding how it works.
The wall actually has several layers, but for our purposes, let's just focus on two key ones. The very innermost layer is the mucosa. It lines that hollow space inside the tube, which is called the lumen, and it secretes the slippery mucus that protects everything and helps food slide along smoothly. Then outside of that, you've got the powerful muscular layer, and that's the engine responsible for mixing everything up and moving it forward.
Now, if we look even closer at that muscular layer, we see it's not just one big, simple sheet of muscle. Nope, it's made of multiple sublayers, with all the muscle fibers running in different directions. This complex structure is what allows for really sophisticated movements, like squeezing and churning.
So in most of the GI tract, you have a circular layer that squeezes the tube and a longitudinal layer that shortens it. But the stomach, which has to do some seriously intense churning, gets a special third layer, an oblique layer for extra mixing power. It's a pretty unique feature for a very unique job.
And within that circular muscle layer, we find these specialized structures called sphincters. You can just think of these as muscular valves. They're basically thickened rings of muscle that act like little gatekeepers. They control the flow from one section to the next, and maybe just as important, they prevent stuff from flowing backward.
So there you have it, a quick flyover of the entire processing plant, from its main mission right down to the architecture of its walls. We've got the blueprint, we understand the goals. So the really logical question now is, where does this incredible, complex process actually begin? Well, that is exactly what we're going to dive into in our next explainer.